In some situations, you may want to add in your own custom buttons to the toolbar. That's completely possible. WordPress even provides some components for making that process easier. To get started, download the zip file in the resource section of this lecture. Unzip the contents inside the app directory. You should be provided with a folder called Night Mode Block. We're going to be building a block where a user can enable night mode. Night mode is a term used to describe UI that switches the contrast from light to dark. This reduces eye strain. We'll make a button that will allow the user to toggle this feature. There are several files here, but it's nothing you haven't seen before. Let's start with the index file. I'm importing the icon for the block and an icon for the button. Let's check that out for a minute. I'm viewing the icon in Illustrator. If you don't have Illustrator, that's perfectly fine. I've already taken the time to export it as an SVG file and export it. You can find the icon inside the icon.js file. All I'm doing here is exporting the SVG code as the default value. Switching back to the index file, I'm importing a Sass file. If you look inside the Sass file, you'll find that I'm just applying a dark background color and a light font color. Take note that this will only apply if the class night mode is applied to the element. Alright, let's go back to the index file. Everything else is the same. We're grabbing some components and registering the block. I'm leaving out the keywords property again to save room. Feel free to add it in if you'd like. The edit function will display some basic content. We're not going to bother adding input fields or changeable content. Everything will be static besides the toolbar. Right above the content, I'm loading the block controls component. It's currently empty, but we'll be adding our custom toolbar soon enough. The save function contains the same HTML as above. That should be it. Now that we have an overview of things, let's get started. To create a custom toolbar, we're going to need a couple of components. These components are optional, but they handle a lot for us, such as formatting, positioning, and design. All these components will come from the wp.components object, so destructure that. We'll need the toolbar, button, and tooltip components. I'll talk about what these components do in just a moment. Next, we're going to set up some attributes. We only need one, which will determine if the content should have night mode enabled. Create an attribute called night mode. The type will be Boolean and the default will be false. We're not setting a source or selector since this will be a simple value. That makes it perfect for storing it inside the comments. With the attribute set, let's begin creating the toolbar. Inside the block controls component, I'm going to load in the toolbar component. The toolbar component will take care of adding a separator between the other toolbars that might be loaded in. It will properly position your button within the block controls component. Next, we're going to load in the tooltip component. This component will display a tooltip if the user hovers over the content placed inside of it. We don't have to worry about the events or positioning as that's handled for us. The only attribute we need to set is the text attribute. Set this to night mode and make it translatable. Inside of the tooltip component, add the button component. The order does matter here. If the button component is placed inside the toolbar component, then the stylings for the button component will be adjusted. The adjustment will make things look consistent with the other buttons on the toolbar. Alright, we're going to apply a few things to this button. First, we have to apply a couple of classes. However, we run into one problem. React currently doesn't support multiple classes for a component. If you scroll up, you'll see I'm loading a module called class names. This is a third-party module that we installed long ago. I promised a very long time ago to explain what this is for, and now I finally can. This module will take care of allowing multiple classes for a component. It's very easy to use. On the button, I'm going to apply the class name attribute. The value for this will be class names function. This will accept in the list of class names you'd like to apply. I'm going to add classes which are components-icon-button and components-toolbar__control. We're going to apply one more class which is-active. However, this will be inside an object. If we want to have dynamic classes, then we have to format it like this. The name will be the class to add, and the value can either be true or false. If it's true, then the class will be added. If false, it won't be added. Set this to props.attributes.night mode. By default, night mode will be false, so this class shouldn't be applied. The isActive class will let the user visually know the button is enabled. I was able to find these classes by looking at the other components and toolbars WordPress creates. It's not documented, so it's always good practice to dive into the code itself to better understand how things work. Next, we want to change the night mode attribute if this button is clicked. We basically want to flip the current value. The button component has an event called onClick. This will be set to an arrow function. Just like before, we'll call the setAttributes function and set the night mode attribute to its opposite value like so. Next, we'll add the button icon variable as the content inside. The width and height should be 20 pixels. I've already applied that to the SVG icon itself. Now that the button is functioning, we just have to apply this to the content itself. Below, I'm going to call the class names function instead of setting the class statically. I'll add the content-example class and make the night class dynamic. The night class will take care of adding the dark background and white text. This is what we named it in our Sass files. This will be set to props.attributes.night mode. I'm going to copy this code and paste it over to the save function since it's the exact same thing. The block is now finished. The last step is to import it. Inside the app.index.js file, import the night mode block module. cd into the blocks directory and run the npm run dev command. You shouldn't receive any errors so far. Go ahead and create a recipe post. If you were to search for the night mode block, then you should be able to find it with the Wahoo icon. Add the block to the editor. All you should see is a simple message. If you were to select it, then you should see the toolbar appear with our custom button and icon. You can click it and it should toggle night mode. If you hover your mouse over the button, then you should see the tooltip as well. This is great. We now have our own custom toolbar. Turn on night mode and then save the post. Try viewing it on the front end. The block should have the stylings applied to it if you did everything right. There's not much to this honestly. You're just loading in a few components and using them to help build your custom toolbar. Before I end this lecture, I do want to note one thing. Tooltips are optional. If you wanted to, you could remove this like so. This is perfectly fine. However, I prefer to add it because it can provide more context to the user just in case they don't understand what your buttons do. I'll add it back in. That does it for now. We'll continue exploring more components in the next lecture.